It is my great pleasure today to introduce everybody to Dilip Shaw. Those that do not know Dilip has been in metrology for probably since what, 8 years old? When did you start trying to measure things, Dilip?
When I was 7 years old. So I can really truly say I got involved in metrology at 7 years, and that's a story for some other time to
That's another
discuss.
story. So he's been in metrology for seven some years. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Dilip for well over a decade. We've worked together. We're good friends. And we talked, we were going to do a training for the week, and we decided to postpone a week-long digital training class. And we came up with, hey, what can we do that'll benefit a lot of the people that are out there? Some time savers and other things. And we came up with this class seems to be highly attended, and Morehouse wanted to present this to everybody for free. So Dilip is helps labs cure their measurement headaches. He is author of the Metrology Handbook, and just general, the award list is very vast on all the awards and everything else that he's won over these years. And I hope that everybody gets great value from this presentation. With that, I am going to mute my microphone and let the maestro take over.
Okay, good morning, everybody. And I know you may be joining from different time zones, but here I'm in Ohio on Eastern time, and it is morning for me. But wherever you are, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be, or maybe very, very early morning. Um, so Excel is a tool application that is dear to me because I grew up in the BC days. And when I talk about BC days, I mean before calculators and before computers. And, I grew up using slide rules and logarithmic tables and trig tables to do my calculations. So when a tool like Excel comes up, it is near and dear to me. And Excel, before Excel, there were other spreadsheets. There was the VisiCalc, that was the first spreadsheet. And then there was Lotus 123, Quattro Pro, and now Excel. When Excel started out, Excel was pretty bad. It didn't have a lot of things in there. But as Excel got better, and the nice thing is almost everybody has Excel. And then if you don't have a spreadsheet, there are other, like the Google spreadsheet and other spreadsheet that pretty much mimic a lot of the things Excel does. And I started doing measurement uncertainty budgets in 1988, and I started using spreadsheets. So back then I was using Lotus 123. Lotus 123 is now extinct, but the other spreadsheet, the Quattro Pro, still exists. I still have a copy, and they issue releases like Excel too, almost like every year, Quattro Pro, 18 months or so. So we thought we would put some quick shortcuts, things that we do. Can't do much in a 1 hour. And as much as I think I'm good at Excel, I probably know 10% of Excel. But what that does is that tells how powerful Excel is. So we will start with some very basic things in Excel, and then we will kind of go and see. Just logistics, you have been muted, so there's no background noise for everybody's comfort. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat panel, and we will answer a few at the end of this webinar in there. Okay, so we're going to talk about some basic math statistical functions, look at some charting capabilities in Excel, Excel shortcuts, and there's so many different shortcuts, and there's some time-saving things we can do instead of manual number crunching. Like I said, in the BC days, I could add 10 numbers in my head in very short time. Like within like 10, 15 seconds, I could add those numbers. Now, if you see me doing that manually, just adding or subtracting two numbers, I'd be struggling because that's how much I've been spoiled by Excel. And then the other thing is, like anything else, this was the whole thing in the 70s when computer programming started getting popular. This was the term GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And that applies to anything you do, including Excel. Fortunately or unfortunately, computers, the AI, the artificial intelligence, hasn't been that it's going to do the thinking for you. And when I think about the thinking, I always think about the Terminator scenario, where the computers get smart and they think all human beings are imperfect, so they must be eliminated. So that's a good thing, that we can still do all the thinking. And then we can let computers or applications like Excel do the sort of a tedious number crunching task. And that always applies. And it is pretty true. Excel can do certain things, but if you don't put thought to it on how we formulate the formulas or the functions we use, it can come and give us an erroneous answer. So we still have to do the thinking in that way. All right, so let's look at some shortcuts. Now, I grew up, like I said, in the BC days, and then I grew up with the personal computer revolution. And when the computer started, we did have this nice little thing called the mouse. And so if you had to do certain things, which you can now do with a couple of clicks of a mouse, you had all these shortcut keys. And those shortcut keys still work. And there are times where I will use that instead of the mouse clicks. And so with Excel, we have some shortcut tricks. And the way it is, you have a control key and another key. The plus sign, you don't have to press the plus sign, but it says the control and the N key, for example, opens a new workbook or opens a spreadsheet. Control home moves you to the home menu. Control P opens the print dialog box. The Control S saves the workbook, and then the Control C copy, cut for Control X, and Control V for paste. So a lot of times I will still use that, when I'm doing these things in my workshops, people will say, well, how did you do that? I just do the right click on the mouse, or I go to the menu and I do the copy, and I say, yeah, these are back from the DOS days. DOS meaning disk operating system. That's what started, originally before the Windows or a graphic environment open, and with the advent of the mouse and so on. And those shortcuts still work. So there's like 2 or 3 different ways you can get to the same place in Excel too. And I'm so glad that Excel has still kept those other shortcut keys in there, because sometimes it's easy for me to do those things. So I just thought I would start with the basics. And then Excel has a sum formula, but you could do the same thing with the alt equals. And the whole idea in there is if you're summing a row of numbers or a column of numbers, you would ideally have one extra cell you would select, and it will do the sum formula. And then there are other variations of it. And I follow a lot of Excel threads and YouTube, and I just found another quick, easy way to do the sum formula, where you had blank rows or columns in between your data, and it will do those actual sub sums between certain ranges and so on. So there's a lot of different ways you could do that. And I just learned that trick like a couple of weeks ago. So remember I said, I probably know 10% of Excel. And then I learned that and it says, oh, it can do this too as well. And a lot of times we have a lot of different Excel windows, and you could click through your mouse, but the control tab will, toggle through those different Excel windows, and then control 1 gives you the format cells dialog. And the format cells, there's a lot of ways you can format the cells for different things, like a number format, a currency format, date format, those kind of things, and it gives you that menu. And one of my favorite shortcuts is the F4 key. And F4 key repeats an action, and it kind of scrolls through all the different combinations you have. And a lot of times when I'm doing a lot of calculations, I want to reference a row or a column all the time. And it will put, if you're on that cell, or not even the cell, but that actual cell reference in a cell, and if you put your cursor by that and go through the F4, it will toggle through all the combinations with the dollar sign, and the dollar sign references to absolute reference. And then if you want to copy that formula through a whole set of rows in a column, and not want to do a relative reference, because otherwise if you do that, it automatically do the other calculations in there. So just some of the other things in there that are there. And I see people are putting in other references too with keys. And what happens is I learn as much sometimes from the other shortcuts people know, and this becomes very useful in WordPress. So just kind of go through that. And I was talking about the alt equals, and I just kind of have a couple of screenshots where you can see I've left the column and a row empty, and I've highlighted it. And then when I do the alt equals, it will go and do the actual sum of the rows and columns. Excuse me. The F2 function basically lets you edit the cell, and but you could also double click and it will do the same thing and help you edit the cell. And a lot of times I teach a lot of measurement uncertainty workshops, and we kind of do it where we kind of build the budgets, and I'll be working on a cell and somebody says, wait a minute, what did you do on that cell? What formula, what references to cells you had? And I can do the F2 key, and it will show the formula. But then there's other keys which will show the formula in all the cells. So that is a useful feature to have. One of the things is if you're using Excel and creating templates, and in terms of the ISO 17025 requirements, if you create a template, you're going to use it, you have to validate it. And if you're going to validate it, or you may just want to keep the spreadsheet where instead of just the template with all the numbers, you want to see what formulas you use. For if some reason the spreadsheet gets corrupted or you gotta create it. You could save it with this, all the formulas showing, not just the single one, and that will kind of give you control and a tilde sign, and it will give you and display all the formulas. And then you could take save it as a spreadsheet like that, and then it will help you with the validation efforts and those kind of things that you have. And of course, F7 is the spell check. And and you could use the spell check by doing a full the tab on the spreadsheet, or you could highlight a number of cells and do a F7, and you could even spell check by grouping multiple tabs in there. So those are a lot of the other things in here. And I see that we have a lot of things that people are sharing too. So that is great in there. But these are some of the things. Yeah. So Andrew made a comment. Who needs spell check? But you'll be surprised what sometimes you spell in there, and sometimes that can be pretty embarrassing. So I do a lot of like internal audits for labs, and I will do my internal audits. I have a spreadsheet template for that. And I always do a spell check, because I'd say, oh my God, if I just sent that without spell check, there's all kinds of things that'll be pretty embarrassing. And I didn't mean it to be that way, but you'll be surprised what it can do with a spell check. Now, it's not perfect, and we work in technical areas, and whatever is in the dictionary, you may not have all the terms. Like, it doesn't have things like repeatability, reproducibility in there. But you know what? You could add those spellings in your dictionary, and then it will do that check. Unfortunately, there is a way to import the dictionary in the other spreadsheet on your or other Excel in other computers. I haven't done that yet, but there's a way to do that, so you have the same spell, your additional dictionary words you may have added to that. And I have like 15 computers, and depending on which one I use, that would be useful. And there's a way to do that in Excel too. And just kind of going still with the shortcut keys, you have the control page up and control page down, and that lets you scroll between the different worksheets in Excel. Now, the thing with page up, page down keys is on my laptop keyboard, those page up, page down keys are shared with other keys. I'm using a Surface tablet, and that's using it with my function keys. So you want to make sure that you have it toggled properly in that way. And now this control plus is it'll view formulas, and this symbol here, the tilde, is the shift key, and that's the one I was talking about. But you don't have to press the shift key. You just do a control. But the tilde key is sometimes shared with other keys because it's a shift function, and that's the one I was telling you about. And a lot of times we look at data which is arranged in rows, but we may want to convert it to columns or vice versa. And then I can use my copy, paste special, and transpose, and it will convert rows to columns and columns to rows. And Excel actually has a transpose function as well, and that gives you another way to do these things in there. And then the other thing is autofilling a series of formulas. And you would normally like click on the cell, and in the bottom right corner, you will have a sort of a plus symbol. You drag it down or left or right, and it will go and fill the cells. And there's a little bit of trick to that. Is if you wanted to increase it by a set number, you may type in 1.1, and then select those two keys with that plus, and then drag it down, and that'll increment it by 0.1, and vice versa. The nice thing about this is it not only works with numbers, but it will also do labels. Like you could do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and drag it down, and it will like fill up, or by month, and things like that. So it works in that way. And then this slide kind of shows you what I was telling you about, and how that does it in there. So those are like some of the things that are nice shortcuts. Or you may just want to like auto number a set of just labels, and you could do just the number value in there. And instead of typing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, or 1.1, 1.2, and so on. So those are some of the things you could do. Now, the other thing is, like, sometimes I want to put a lot of text in my cells, but I want to say, like, this is, and then 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now, normally in a cell, if I want to put all of those things in there, I'm going to have to like add the extra spaces until it sprawls down to the next part and so on. And that is kind of a pain in the neck, because then you share that spreadsheet with somebody, and the way their spreadsheet is set up, it will not line up properly. So you could actually force a carriage return within a cell in the labels, and then you could force the carriage return by pressing the Alt Enter, and then it will keep that Alt Enter, and you could actually have bullet points and things like that as well. So so those are nice things in here. And I talked about like formatting a cell to a certain format, a date format, a number format. So I can format one cell, but then I want to format those other cells to a same format. Excel has a format painter, and if you click on the format painter button, or in that copy and format paint, it's got another option to do that. You can then format the cells, and you could do like one cell to another, or you have a whole bunch of cells. If you and they don't have to be in a continuous order. If you double click on that format painter, it looks like a paintbrush symbol. You can double click, or just double click once on that, and then go and click the appropriate cells you want to format the same way, and it will go and format it. And the only thing you have to do is, once you're done, you got to press the escape key, or the next cell you select, it will go and format it inadvertently. And that's the only other thing like you have to worry about. But since I teach measurement uncertainty and I use Excel, there are certain number formats I like to use, and it's much easier for me to do it this way, and for us to display looking at metrology. There's a lot of things that happens, and we want to format it the same way. So I use the format painter quite a bit, for that purpose. And the other thing is, in my spreadsheet, I have a lot of different tabs. And again, the tabs by default are just the regular, white with the black text. But it makes it a little bit easier if I had the different color tabs. It's a lot easier to distinguish.
Hey, Dillip, we lost your screen for a second. The share.
Okay, yeah, and I saw something happen in there. So uh, this was the screen I was working with, but everybody, can you see the screen now?
No.
All right, so let me do this. I actually lost the control. So is Heather still there? Heather needs to give me the control back because there's no way I can click and
Okay. Well, while Heather's going to give you the control, I'll go over here. Hopefully Heather can give you the control. Dillip, you can drive a little bit over here on the share screen. I can try to give you the screen. Some of the things that you were talking about earlier for
yeah,
people were the format painter, right? If I like something,
yeah.
so to say, if I wanted to
All right,
highlight,
so now I
got,
have the
you got it back? Okay.
yeah,
If you got it back, I'll stop my share. Here, I'll show them real quick what you were talking about with the painter while we're doing that.
yeah. But
So
people
if
should
I
see.
like, yeah, if I like these, I could go to Format Painter here, look at all this, um, and then copy. See what I did? I copied it over to white. If I liked this Format Painter, I come over here, and now they're all gray. But that being said, here I'm gonna.
All right, so let
Hopefully,
me
you can come back on.
yeah, let me get back to the screen here. Yeah, there was like a blip, and then and I saw something happen where I lost control.
Yep.
All right, so now you should be able to see my screen.
Yep, we
Uh,
can see it.
yeah, so
And
for
I
some,
showed them very badly how to do what you're showing.
yeah, and if we need to, like, I can do the same thing. I do have an Excel spreadsheet, and if we need to, we can, like, I can jump back and forth and we could show you that. But what I was saying was, it's kind of nice to like have the different tabs colored. And actually, I am going to like switch. And here I have a spreadsheet, and you can see, I've got all the different tabs, different color for different things. So that's one nice thing I can do in there by just, and it's easy to kind of distinguish. And I could have a special color code for different things in there. But I could do that with the default colors, and then there's more colors. And like I said, I grew up in the BC days, and then I grew up with earlier versions of Excel. And if you had before 2007, then you had just like a 6 colors. And now you have probably a combination of some 1 million colors or so, with some special color and the different shading of those colors in there. So you do have quite a bit of color that you could do color coding in there. But it just makes it easy to like distinguish in there. And the other thing is sometimes you want to combine either the text or other labels or anything like that. And you could use this ampersand symbol to combine the references, and it will combine the text or whatever value you have in from others into a single cell. And then you could format it by putting, space between quotation marks and other things. And one of the things I like to do is we look at like TUR formula and we calculate 4 to 1. And then this 4 to 1, the colon that you do in the calculation, it will just show like 4.02. But 4 to 1, if I wanted to do this, I can use that to add that to my cell, and it will show the 4 to 1 TUR, test uncertainty ratio, or things like that in there. And there's many times I have used this just to kind of show in the presentation in the Excel, because otherwise Excel is really a number cruncher and nothing else does that. So it gives us opportunities. Now, there are pre-formatted formats in the Excel. And I said, you got number formats, you got currency formats, you got date formats, and different ones. But there's also custom formats you could do. And there's a bunch of custom formats already defined for you. You can take them, you could modify them and create your own format as well. And some of these I've shown you here how to do in here. But if you go to like Excel, one of my custom format is, I'm very picky about engineering notation. Now Excel has the scientific notation format already predefined. Engineering that don't have it predefined, but if you go to the custom and follow those keys, and it will give you that format. And then when it gives you that format, it only has a 1 decimal format. And if I wanted to create a one with 2 decimals, then I can just go 0, 0, E plus 0, and I would have created my another format. So I can take already a predefined custom format and then create one. The other things like you could have a phone number. So you would have an area code and then, your 3 digits and 4 digits in the US. Or you may want to put the +1 for the country code for US or anything like that. And you would create formats like that. Or there's a lot of other formats you could create. But it's kind of interesting that your $10 scientific calculator has keys for scientific and engineering notation, or the SI notation. A lot of times they'll call this the SI notation as well. But since I teach a lot of measurement uncertainty workshops, and in uncertainty values could be small, and I like to show them in engineering format, because then I can relate to them in the magnitude of the number, whether it's 1,000 times bigger, smaller, million times bigger, smaller, and anything like that. So those are the kind of things that are useful and worthwhile to do with the engineering format in there. And remember, again, garbage in, garbage out. So the more we do these things up front and make our spreadsheets more foolproof, the better it is, and show it in the proper format. And it is a lot useful in that manner in here. And then the other thing is sometimes you copy a formula, and the formula has references to different cells. And if you copy that formula to another cell, it is going to take those cell references, and depending on whether they're relative or absolute references. It may reference a completely different cell, but you just want to just copy the values, and then you could do the same thing, copy, paste special, and paste values. Or you could go through this whole Alt E, S, V, enter, and it would do the same thing. So there's other shortcuts, like I could do it by my mouse clicks, or I can have a combination of those keys. And yeah, the combination of those keys, that's a lot of keys to press at the same time. And I'm not very, quick with those fingers. And so that's one thing. And then sometimes I just want to copy the formula instead of values. And that I could do the same thing. So the paste special function is kind of useful in that way. Excuse me. And the other thing is sometimes you have labels or rows of labels or columns that when you scroll your spreadsheet, which could be pretty huge, from column to column or rows to rows, and then you don't want to go back and say, well, what is that row? And you kind of go back. So you can freeze rows and columns, or a combination of rows and columns. So those stay frozen, and the rest of the spreadsheet, scrolls up, down, right, left, and so on. And you could do it in the View tab and then Freeze Panes, and it will give you those options to do that. So those are all like useful things from the presentation aspect of the spreadsheet, and the way you calculate formulas, and those gives you the different shortcuts through different ways, either using your keys or mouse clicks or the Excel menu in there. Now, the other thing I have an issue or is when I teach my classes, a lot of labs have older versions of Excel. And when I say older versions of Excel, anything before 2010. Now, Excel started getting the transformation to the ribbon menu starting with the 2007 version. And then 2007, it added enhanced functions to what legacy functions that were out there and so on. It's just like that color scheme I was saying. Before 2007, Excel had a palette of like 15 colors. And so compatibility-wise, you have to be careful that not all of these things work in all the versions of Excel. And sometimes some things may not work. But what I've tried to do is most of those things will work. But if it doesn't work, and if you're using an older version of Excel, then that may not work. And what I found is sometimes laboratories will have older versions of Excel. And they have it for a lot of reasons. The application they've written, the macros and everything is in there. It will not work in the newer versions of Excel, so they will keep using the older legacy versions of Excel. So you do need to keep that in mind as you go through some of these things in here. But I try to use, if there's a legacy function available, I try to use that because I will have people in my classes, they'll have, I don't know what versions they have. If I use the legacy functions, they will work in the newer versions of Excel, but not the other way around. And then I just kind of mentioned that in here. Now, the other thing is, sometimes laboratories will print their calibration or test certificate, the report, in Excel. And Excel has a way you could, set your print area, format it. But there are times where you may not want to print everything from top down. You may have something in the middle that you may not want to print. And the thing with the newer version of Excel is you could add to the print area. So you can define your first print area, and then you could add, omitting those areas in the middle or so. And then you could format a really nice, report that you want to print. And you could print preview and set it up and do that. And then if you wanted to clear an area, you can obviously clear the print area as well. So that is one thing that you could do, and you could do a pretty good formatted print area in Excel. So that is another thing you could do. And then obviously you have things you could set where your page breaks. So the data is the technical term is like you don't want the data like from one page to another where you're in the middle of a paragraph or so, and then it continues. And in the technical terms, they call it widows and orphans. So you could, set your page breaks properly, so you don't have widows and orphans. And that's a term from word processing, I guess, that you could do in Word, but you could do similar things in Excel as well. So, and then part of the print is you may want, just like we froze the panes, we could do the same thing. We want the rows to repeat at the top and the rows to repeat at the bottom in the same way. And then we could have a pretty contiguous report. So we could set up this. Now, this page setup is kind of interesting. Part of this page setup, you can get it from the print menu. But this part, you have to go in the page layout menu in Excel to kind of set that up. And then you could set it up. And it's got enough flexibility to be able to fix it and format your proper print menu in there. And then obviously once you do it, you could kind of do a print preview and it gives you an idea and then do that. But there are certain things like the menus are accessible, but these kind of things are not accessible in other areas. So there's some nuances to Excel relating to this in there. Now, the other thing, remember our garbage in, garbage out. And when you're going through your grade school, there's different terms that you had, but I had this PEMDAS, and you remember it by please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, but it was the order of operations. You have things that calculate in parentheses. Next order was exponents. That was multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. And this is how you did it manually. And to a degree, Excel does this, but don't rely on it. Because if it's simple enough a rule, it will do it. If it's not simple enough a rule, go ahead and kind of put the appropriate parentheses. So the order of operations, this rule is not violated. Otherwise, you are going to get different results. And all the more reason to validate anything you create in Excel by doing that. The problem is some calculators have gotten smart about this. They'll do it, but don't rely on it because Like I said, garbage in, garbage out. So Excel's still not there, but neither is any software. So if you are going to build very complex formulas in Excel, and that complex calculation, the order of operations, will be important, and you should do that, and you should validate it for sure. And we looked at some shortcuts, the alt equals, the sum, but these are just some of the functions, and average. And we use a lot of averaging in our, metrology QA applications. And last year, Morehouse came up with a great cartoon about averages. So I thought I would put that in. And averages could be very dangerous. And I used to say this, you can have your head in an oven, feet in ice, and on average, you feel fine. And Morehouse came up with an application and showed you the danger of averages. So here the aircraft weight is 30,000 plus or minus 300 pounds. That's the specification for takeoff weight. Here's the 5 repeated measurements they've done and taken an average. And the average is perfect. It's 30,000 of these 5 values. But you could have a lot of issues with that, because if we take the statistics on the average and look at it, the limits is plus or minus 300, but the variability of those 5 measurements is 10 times more. So obviously, when you use averages, you should either look at and report the range or the associated standard deviation. And so I just thought I would put that with the average function. So an innocent looking calculation like that, there's other things that happen to us. And this is something that happens in measurement uncertainty. I just had an email from one of my attendees in class, and they say, yeah, we do this, and they do a critical function, and that test that they produce and the result, that can send somebody to jail, or that can send somebody to their freedom and claim them innocent. And they do 2 measurements, and they take an average. Now you're only taking 2 measurements and an average, and so I have to respond to that question. And I said, what is the right thing to do? And the right thing to do, there's other things we talk about in measurement uncertainty, but a lot of times that's only the luxury you have, luxury of making 2 measurements. And 2 measurements better than 1, but it still has dilemma like this. And here we have 5 measurements, and the average is perfect, and it is 30,000, but the variance associated with that is 3,000, and that's not good, because now we have an error associated that's quite high. And you can see the specifications. If you could see these narrow lines, is what it is. The variability is this probability distribution curve. So those things can be critical in our decisions. So when you use average, yeah, it is there, but for our application from metrology QA, that could have large consequences in there. But I just thought I would mention that. And then there are other calculations. So when you have a lot of variability in your measurements, sometimes it's better to report a median. That means 50% of values are above the median, 50% are below the median, and that's something you could have in there. Or the range, and you could calculate the range as a difference of the max function and the minimum function in Excel. to use in there. The other thing is we do square root, root sum square, and the square root function. You could have a number, or you could have a reference to a cell, and it will calculate the square root for us. The other way to calculate square root is you could have a cell reference raised to the power of 0.5. That will give you square root 2, but there are other ways to do square root 2 if you wanted to do that. So let's point those out. The other number base, you could use the exponent, and then you could use the E, Euler's constant, and then the function for the exponent, and you can apply to the base E in there as well. And Excel has the natural log again, or the log function base 10. This natural log is base E in here, and those are some of the functions we may use if you were to calculate the probability distribution with the Gaussian function that uses the exponent function, and that works in there. Now, Henry mentioned in his chat the average if works well to ignore zeros, but even the average will work and ignore zeros. But if you wanted to be sure, you could use the average if, but average works. And I've tried it both ways, and I get the same result. So I use the average by itself, but he pointed out in the chat window. So I just thought I would mention that as well in there. And like I said, the log function. Now, with the log function, if you just use as a log, then it will assume the base 10. But you could have any base in the log function. So you could even have the base E in there, and then it will work like the natural log, the ln function I had in the previous slide. So that's something that you could do. Now, there is this function, deviation square, and the other function is a sum square. This is the sum of the squares. This is the deviation square, deviation of the squares. So if we calculate our standard deviation, if you were to manually calculate the sample standard deviation, that calculation would be the sum of squares divided by degrees of freedom, or Bayes formula. So you say, oh, sum of squares. I can use this. Wrong. You gotta use this in the numerator of the, if you were to manually calculate the variance, that is the function you use. Because if we break that formula, it is the, in the numerator, it is the sum of individual values minus the average squared. So the deviation square does that calculation. The sum of squares, it just takes the 5, 7, 9. It's 5 squared plus 7 squared plus 9 squared, and it gives you the sum of squares. And there are times I've seen people use that. But obviously, you already have a variance function, standard deviation function. You're not going to use that. But I've seen labs do some weird things for their specific calculation, and they get the wrong thing. And that's why the more reason for validating your spreadsheet. And so Yeah, so the thing is, I'm kind of reading Henry's comment is, yes, if you have a 0 in a cell, then it will take it as a numerical value and it will include it in the average. But if you have a blank cell, then the average function will ignore that cell. So that's the key thing is, so in that case, you could use the average if function that Henry's pointed out in the chat window in there. Okay, so ideally, one of the things I do is like I would have a spreadsheet and I could put any number of values in there. And in that case, it will work okay. And since I have a spreadsheet here, I will show you what Henry is talking about. So I here have data, and it is doing a calculation. So the way I have it, and I have nothing in the cells 6 through 20, then the average is going to be that. But if I put the 0 in here, like Henry says, then you could see the average did change. But if I don't have anything, then it will just count the sum divided by 5 in that one. So there are like caveats. So if I had average if, then it's going to ignore the zeros. But the problem with that is in our measurement scenario, we do have values that could be sometime very close to 0. And then we have to like say, do I want to include it or may not want to include it? So I like using the average function because there are certain things that are very, very small in Excel, okay? So I kind of use that logic. And so there's things you have to think about how you're going to use when you create your Excel templates for different kind of things. So, but the way I have it, whether I use the average or average if, it's going to give me the same results unless I have a value 0. Then Excel will say, yeah, it has a 0 is a value, so it then counts it as an average. And now it's going to divide by 6. So that's the difference in that. So that's a good point that you made, Henry, here. And like I said, Excel has the variance function. And I said there are legacy functions and there are enhanced functions. And I tend to use legacy functions because they work in either or. Excel claims that if you use these, you get a little bit more precision. I'm not sure about it because if they had a little bit more precision, they should give me the same result or the same, or they shouldn't give me any errors, but it gives me the same errors that I got in the legacy function. And Excel has got some bugs in there and it reproduces that. So I'm going to stick with my legacy function for now. Every year I kind of decide, should I just go to the enhanced functions? And then I find out that somebody needs the legacy functions. So I kind of go ahead and keep it, but I keep a close eye on what's happening out there. And then I still try to use legacy. Unless there's a new function I want to use, then, and there are some other neat functions Excel comes out with all the time, so we could use that. And the same thing with the standard deviation functions with both sample, population, standard deviations. So we have those functions in there. And then it doesn't have the standard deviation of the mean function, but I mention it because in measurement uncertainty calculations, a lot of labs use this for the wrong reason. So I just have it there just as a guidance, a reference. that if you do that, you are dealing with, as the term implies, averages and not with individual measurements. And so I just have that as a sort of a reference for you. The other thing Excel does, like I said, it is very good with statistical functions. And with statistics, there are population statistics distributions and small sample size distributions. And in the BC days, we would look at the back of the statistics books to get at these Z distribution and T distribution tables. Excel can generate those tables, and they can generate it the way you like it versus what's already predefined. And so Excel helps us do that. And here's some functions to do the calculation and then create those tables or utilize that. And again, these are legacy functions, and there are the enhanced functions as well. So one of the things, like if you wanted, the F1 key in Excel is the help key. And you could type in and it will give you not only the associated functions, or it will get you to the area you want to, and then you could look at it. And I think their help key has examples besides the function. So it's a really nice way to like look at Excel functions. And a lot of times, like I said, I only know 10% of Excel. And if there's something I don't know if I can do, I will go to the F1 key and type in, and it will look at things. And I may have to type in a couple of different combinations, but it gets me there a lot of times. And it is a useful thing. Now, the newer versions, if you press the F1 key, you do need an internet connection. The previous versions had the help key with all the help files filled in and loaded into your Excel. But with the internet connection, they go and update it more, so you get more updated, more enhanced help. So, but just want to warn you, if you don't have an internet connection, it may not work in the newer versions of Excel in there. And there are things that Henry and I were having a chat and doing the calculations, and the new standards are about risk-based thinking and making statements of conformity. And there are, of course, mathematical formulas we have to build in, calculating the risk-based thinking. And you could see I have used some of those statistical functions and how to calculate the CPK, the test uncertainty ratio in there. And I just kind of give you whatever the actual functions and the formulas that we use in there. So it kind of gives you an idea of what's being used in Excel to do some very, very powerful calculations. And like I said, the statement of conformity is associated risk. CPK is process capability calculations, and those kind of things are built in there. So, and then I C7, as Henry is saying, I don't have the cell references in here, but I think I should probably put like the cell references in here so you could see what the references is. So I think I had it, but on the the new update I have, I probably have the cell references in there. So, but the other the t distribution table, like I said, in the statistics books, you don't have all the probabilities. And Morehouse does force calibration to E74. E74 has a 98.4% or 2.4 standard deviations. That comes out to 98.36% confidence interval. So I can build those customized columns for the appropriate standard deviation and the appropriate confidence interval. So I could do that. And in this next slide, I show you those functions. And again, I'm using legacy functions, and there are enhanced functions. So if you press the F1 key and go to TINV, and the enhanced function is going to be T.INV, and it will do the same thing as the TINV function. And TDIST will be T.DIST, and so on, like that. So just to kind of give you an idea on these other statistical functions that Excel can use. And then we look at the K coverage factor for reporting our expanded uncertainty. And if we have the common misconceptions, K equals 2, but K equals 2 at approximately 95% confidence interval at infinite degrees of freedom. If you have different degrees of freedom, then the K value could be different. And using the TINV calculation, we could calculate the actual value of K in there. And that will get us out of a mess of not over-evaluating our uncertainty, nor under-evaluating the uncertainty. Because if we over-evaluate the uncertainty, under-evaluate it, both have consequences. And what I mean by that, if I under-evaluated the uncertainty, I am passing something I should have failed. If I over-evaluate the uncertainty, I'm failing something I should have passed. And so those are the things that help us do these calculations. And before Excel and with its powerful array of mathematical and statistical functions, we were at a mercy of the tables in the back. And sometimes those tables didn't give us the exact calculation. If I go back to my t-distribution table, somewhere down after, now I created up to 30, but those tables went to 20, and the next row was 25 and 30. So if you have degrees of freedom 22, you were out of luck. And you couldn't interpolate because these are not linear functions. So that's not a good thing to do in that way, okay? So Excel gives us a lot of flexibility to calculate things with a greater degree of confidence, and with this risk-based thinking and reporting statements of conformity using the decision rules. Now this helps us formulate better decision rules in our calculations. Now, Excel has a random number generation function. And by itself, that number generation function gives us values from 0 and 1. That's not very useful. Now, I can define and enhance that function by adding this, where I can have an upper, lower limit, and it's going to generate numbers within this upper and lower limit. Now, this gives me a rectangular distribution function, lower limit, upper limit, and I can now generate a lot of random numbers. And you say, what good is this? Well, in measurement uncertainty, there's a Monte Carlo gum supplement. Excuse me. And that is another way of calculating measurement uncertainty based on that. And that's another way to calculate measurement uncertainty using the random number generation function. And I could do that. And there are certain areas in measurement uncertainty. This provides a better way of doing measurement uncertainty. And there's NIST has a uncertainty machine application that uses this technique. But before the NIST uncertainty machine came about, I could do it using this way. And just like this function generates the rectangular distribution, there's another one that does a Gaussian distribution, another one that does triangular, and another one that's U-shaped. And we could do all of those using this technique, using the random generation function in there. So, and you can see here I've created numbers between 10.01 to 9.999 in there. So, and then we looked at the deviation square, and then the sum of squares is in there. Before we started this workshop, Henry was talking about these different Greek characters, and so here's the Unicode for that, and I've given you some of the Greek character references that you could do the alt plus the numbers in there. Now, Excel's got a symbol thing, and you could do it, but if you do this, it will give you the appropriate Greek letter in here. So now, the random between number that Tony pointed out here, random between number is not a very good function, because random between will just give you the integer values between the top and the bottom. So I would refrain from using the random between number. The random between numbers kind of nice, like if you're kind of doing a lottery raffle and you got like 32 participants and you want to pick a random number. Yeah, that's good in there. But the random between number for like what we want to do in measurement uncertainty, that's not a good function, okay? Now since you mentioned the random between function, there's a way to do that where you do not repeat that integer value, and there are tricks to doing like that where you don't repeat it. And I have it somewhere saved how to do that. But thanks for pointing that out, Tony. Yeah, so. Okay, so the other thing we do is convert numbers, units, pounds to kilogram, and vice versa, inches to metric and so on. The Excel does have convert function. And actually, it is a good function, and Excel keeps adding units to that. So you need to check from time to time. Before it was pretty limited, it had like 6 units, and I'm talking about years ago. But it's gotten better and better every time. So if I wanted to convert pounds to grams, that would be, here is 1 pound. But you gotta use the right lingo, and then it will go and give you the value, as I did here. And so since we're talking about force, and I said, all right, I'm gonna put in the the weight and mass units. So you got to put the right nomenclature for the units as Excel recognizes it. And then your unit of distance. And yeah, I kind of like this, the light years and parsecs. So when I talk my Star Trek terms, now I can think about those things in there. Okay. And then the pressure units and some force units in here. So I have those in here. And then charting tools. And in the Morehouse website, Henry talks about calculating polynomial, and the calculating the right constants for polynomial curve fitting and so on. So there's some already excellent reference in there, and Henry put that out earlier. But just want to show you that Excel can chart using the chart, and then Excel has a quick and dirty trend line function that can give you like 5 different trend lines. The linear one is one I've done. Polynomial, it will do to the 6th order. And then there's exponential, logarithmic, and a couple other ones that you have. So that's like a quick and dirty way of doing things. But and then the one that Henry's given is the actual line EST function for the curve fit in there. So, and like I said, I use a lot of the things I showed you in my measurement uncertainty template. And I kind of went and showed you when I was doing that average to those calculations in there. So you could build some pretty elaborate templates for metrology, QA, creating control charts with the Excel, and they work very well in there. And it can do a lot of other things in there. So I think this is probably my last slide, but I just wanted to give you like some of the things I use. And like I said, there's a lot many. Some of you shared some of the ones that you had in here. So I thank you for your participation.